Good morning. Who else needs big tea this morning or coffee? Me. I've been thinking a lot about shadow work, so I actually did a few videos, but they weren't quite right. Shadow work is something that is brought up in groups I'm in a lot and online, and the importance of it. So I want to address that topic today. I want to talk about first what it actually is. If you do a web search, I'm going to tell you the sentence that came up, or two sentences that came up when I did a web search, which is a good summation. It says shadow work is a process of exploring and acknowledging the parts of ourselves that we have repressed or ignored, such as trauma or resentment. The goal is to develop self awareness and self acceptance by integrating these parts into our whole self. So, I think that's a good summation, especially since it has one word missing, and that is heal. And let me tell you why I think that's important. I follow David Bedrick, who's a great psychologist who talks a lot about shame. And he actually made a post this morning around this topic that worked well with the video idea I already had in mind. So let's call it Kismet. But he was giving himself as an example about the child in him that was injured by someone who wouldn't hear him and who didn't value him. And immediately he would begin thinking about how he should work on himself. He should be more mature. He should work on his trauma and triggers. I need to this, I need to that, if I were more regulated, etc., etc. But all of these intentions only amplified his suffering. So he stopped all of the effort and thinking of himself as a problem to solve or an illness to heal. And the more he allowed himself to feel and the more he honored his own feelings and processed that, then the more his heart opened and the more he was able to embrace his inner self, right? This is what I call for myself when I did shadow work, which, let's be clear, I'm currently doing it now too. I was reminded yesterday of my hatred for country music was always rooted in the town I came from and how betrayed I felt by it. And I was listening to it a little yesterday and I felt emotions move. I felt almost tearful hearing some of the music, and I didn't hate it that much. It was that I was so betrayed by this small town of people that I felt that they give the impression that small towns stick together when really you have to be really careful because somebody's always out to hurt you and make things up just to make to watch you burn. And I still will never know why. Other than the fact that we don't all work on our shadow work. But I segued there and I didn't mean to. But the point is I recognized my inner child, and the process of shadow work for me was, and I'm looking at notes that I took, um, it was giving my inner child what it never received. So I literally, and this it's continues on throughout your life because also these are the most permanent parts of your brain because whatever happened in your developmental phase of life, and you might not even have memory of it, but it creates these deep, let's say, ridges in your brain. The neural pathways are very permanent, and we can create new ones around that. We can choose to respond to things in a new way and create new pathways so that our knee jerk reaction isn't to get back into a unhealthy relationship or to make that comment or post online that is coming from a space of us being emotionally hijacked because we're so angry or we're so fearful. But we can actually pause and see who is this that's actually wanting to respond in this situation? Who is this that wants to form this friendship or new relationship? Is this me now and a healthy need? Because we all do need each other. We are social humans. We need community. We need each other. But we need each other in healthy ways for healthy reasons. Are we trying to amplify the good and joy in our life? Because when we do heal traumas, and healing is necessary, then it opens us up for joy. But there's a balance. If we think that we are constantly a problem to solve, we are working from a space of shame. And we haven't integrated that shadow self, which to me is my little self. So when I was, and I did see psychologists for years, and then I also studied holistic psychology and was mentored by a trauma psychologist for 5 years. And I learned how to integrate my shadow self by just accepting little me. I would visualize it. Like if I felt really triggered by something or really like I could feel my physical body even just worked up about something, my heart rate would go up, or even if it was overly positive or overly negative, if it was really extreme in either way, I would always take a breath, which already disrupts that ingrained unconscious thought. And I would check in with little me. And I remember all of the things that I felt when I was little that I wanted to change. You know, I felt abandoned. I felt misunderstood. I felt alone. Not that being alone was necessarily bad, but it was lonely when nobody heard me, when nobody was affectionate with me. I know it was never accepted. And is this the part of me that's responding? That pain from that space? Because when little you isn't heard for a really long time or ignored for a really long time, I almost began to see it as like this dragon, a dragon that was chained up. And when I saw little me, I would visualize, if I was really angry, it's little me petting the dragon and reminding it that it's love and it's okay to be angry. There is appropriate anger. Wrath is an appropriate anger, but it's comes from a very grounded, pragmatic space as opposed to this rash, coming up with all of these obscure reasons why you're just angry. Even if you don't really understand and you can't really say why you're mad, then that's usually something makes you angry and you even can't pinpoint exactly why and what solution there is to it. Then that was for me the moment to step back and check in with my little self. Was she wanting to make friends with this dragon that was really a very safe dragon? It was just repressed and chained up in this cave or dungeon for its entire life, and it needed out. It needed to be heard. It needed to be felt. And I would imagine adult me, because I have a granddaughter now, and if she came to me with this feeling, how would I respond? I would listen to her. I would watch her cues. I would hold her if she needed it. I would give her space if she needed it, but I would make sure she felt heard and that she was valued and that anything that she was feeling mattered. I had a grandmother that was that way with me, and without her, I don't. She's been like my guiding light through life. So that's one of the reasons I make these videos is even if I haven't met my granddaughter yet, that she can look back at these if I'm not around anymore and when I'm not around anymore, um, knowing that I pushed through my own fears and anxieties of being misunderstood and my own little shadow self. And I hold my little Micah's hand and say, "This is for your future ancestors." Because we need to treat each other with compassion. And there's a lot of compassion and kindness lacking in the world. And to me, when I look at the world now, I just see a lot of people who have not held their little selves. They haven't given their little selves what they needed. And they, including myself, fill it with stuff you know, buying things or filling it with people, these this void, this empty void you try to fill with food, entertainment. We exhaust ourselves avoiding this, which is what we call dissociating when you're unaware that you're doing it. But it is something that happens to virtually everyone who has not had the most perfect upbringing with the most affectionate parents and the most healthy attachments with no trauma whatsoever. And if you know any of those people, I'd love to know more about them because I don't think any of us can say that. But I was listening to a podcast, and that's one of the reasons that pushed me to do this video. It was years ago too, so I've been thinking about this a long time. And it was a podcast I really enjoyed, and I actually haven't listened to it since because it was so frustrating that this was allowed on their podcast, that nobody questioned it. Because I think that if I had a podcast and I hosted, there's a gentle way to ask deeper questions in order to get maybe a more clarifying response, or at least somebody to acknowledge where their limitations are. Because the best healers, because obviously we do our own healing, but the best healers, which are people who facilitate your healing, help you facilitate it, because we all have blind spots, right? Are the people who know their own limitations and also know maybe the best next step if you don't know yourself, so that you can learn to trust your own intuition. And they ask the right questions to help you know what you need. And they hear you say it and they say it back to you. That's what coaching really is supposed to be, at least when I studied life coaching and trauma psychology. So this woman that they were interviewing called herself a shadow coach, shadow work coach, something like that, and an astrologer. And she was talking about how when she works with clients, if somebody's having a hard time really delving into that shadow self, then she would have them give that aspect of themselves a different name so that they can approach it a little easier. And I am still triggered thinking about it. Because the thing is we're already dissociating because of the rejection and the shame that we were made to feel. Because, yes, people can make us feel something when we're little kids, right? We have a little more control over how we respond, how we respond with our adult feelings, especially if that feeling is coming from a space from a long time ago. And it reminds our nervous system, even if our brain isn't remembering, our nervous system remembers, and the same hormones are being released, and that pattern gets deeper and deeper ingrained in us. But then when you tell someone to call it something other than you're getting further away from integrating it. You're actually encouraging conscious disassociating, which is conscious disconnect. So, if you do get help, first of all, let me just say that if this sounds way too scary to do on your own, or there are workbook and journals online that a lot of people really have had a lot of success with, written by psychologists, you can try those sorts of things on your own because, we can't all afford mental health care. I know that's hard. There are a lot of options out there, apps, things like that. But I do encourage you to try to look for someone who's trauma informed. If it's that difficult for you to look at the child self and what happened, you don't even have to go into what happened, but how you were made to feel and how it impacts your life now, and embrace and accept who you are now. And usually it's best with some support of another person that can let you feel what you feel. In your physical body, you'll feel something. You might get nauseous. You might even throw up. There's a lot of somatic stuff that happens through this process with people. Honor that and make sure you have it addressed. Um, even getting massages would help. Energy work helps. I did cranial sacral therapy, and a lot of times the body would release some of these patterns because they were stuck in the physical body, and it helped the person recognize it mentally and they just kind of moved on with their life. And they would notice it, but it wouldn't have a hold on them as much as it did because it does get trapped in our physical bodies too, which I will get into. But the more we hang on to certain emotions, they impact different organs. Our nervous system is affected. It's a whole science and it's fascinating, which I can do more videos on if you guys are interested, but I'd have to break each one down into separate videos. But as I was saying, please find someone that's a mental health professional that is trauma informed. Psychologists are great. I'm sure there's counselors out there that are good. Psychiatrists are good if you think you may need a medication to help you get through this initial aspect. Um, but a lot of psychologists can also see you and recommend medication. That's what I did because I didn't have a psychiatrist near me. So I saw a psychologist who recommended medication to my primary care doctor who prescribed it. I ended up not needing it because that was not my issue. It actually made everything worse. My issue was just needing to work through the trauma and feeling it and letting my body physically release it in different ways. Cranial sacral therapy is what helped me the most. So that's why I learned cranial unwinding was to help other people with that. So I hope this is helpful. I didn't mean it to be this long, but it's a very complex topic. And again, these different emotions affect different organs. We wonder why there's all these physical ailments, n- not to mention our food. So don't get me started on that. But it also has to do with stuff we're not dealing with in our physical bodies. And sometimes we are not ready to talk. Um, Talk therapy might not be our thing just yet, but getting your physical body worked on can help us feel safer to start integrating some things. I mean, psychiatrists and psychologists will have somebody talk about past abuse and bruises will start showing up on their body as they're talking about it. The body's literally reliving it and releasing it in that moment. So you do need, if it's serious, which a lot of us it is, you do need someone that has trauma informed training to help you work through that so that you can release the shame that you have around it. The more we hang on to that shame, the more we hold ourselves back. So I hope you have a wonderful day. This is coming out around the eclipse season, which is all about shadow work. Coincidentally, I didn't really plan it that way. But I was noticing resentment in myself yesterday, and this is something I need to sit with. Maybe force myself to listen to some country music so I can let it go a little bit and think about all the happy memories I have around country music and not the anger and rage that I hold within. My liver is very stressed out right now. When you go through menopause, I will tell you this, if you do not do this work early on in your life, when you start going through the perimenopausal period, which for some women starts as early as 37, everything you have not worked through gets amplified by a million in your physical body and in your mental health. So please, 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 you are never too young and you're never too old to get the help that you know you need and deserve. So I'm sending love to you. Take care of you and have a blessed day. I don't ever say that because it sounds cheesy, but that sounds all right, right? Eh.